On the broadcast tonight, President Park Geun-hye calls Japan's wartime sexual slavery a violation of universal women's rights that need to be resolved accordingly. Now this as the UN panel urges Japan to make an apology and take full responsibility. Impossible to determine the cause of death. That is the Korean State Forensic Agency's conclusion on its investigation into the death of the fugitive shipping tycoon allegedly responsible for April's ferry disaster. And reports indicate debris from the Air Algerie plane that went missing over northern Mali with 116 on board has been found about 50 kilometers from the Mali-Burkina Faso border. Early edition begins now.
I see trees of green, red roses.
늘 남편 먼저,
I see them
늘 자식 먼저.
for me and
레이디 퍼스트라는 말을 믿고 살아온 당신. 오늘만큼은 세상 누구보다 당신이 먼저입니다. 한 분 한 분 특별하게 모시겠습니다.
Excellence in Flight, Korean Air.
It is 5 a.m. in New York, 10 in Algiers, and 6 p.m. on Friday, the 25th of July here. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Geunhye.
And I'm Daniel Che. Thank you for joining us. For the first time in over a year, President Park Geun-hye met a visiting Japanese politician on this Friday.
And during that meeting, the Korean leader was told that her Japanese counterpart wants to improve the two countries' strained relations. First, here's our Choi Yoo-sun.
In a rare meeting with a Japanese politician on Friday, President Park emphasized that without a correct understanding of history, Korea and Japan will not be able to build a trust-based relationship. During talks with Tokyo Governor Yoichi Masuzoe, the president referred to a nation's territory as its body and its history as its soul. She said that harming a country's soul shakes the foundation of that nation. She also said that cooperation between the two neighboring countries was essential for peace and stability in Northeast Asia, and that politics shouldn't get in the way of bilateral relations. The Korean leader's remarks came after Masuzoe delivered a message from Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who said he intends to work towards mending ties with Seoul. Bilateral ties have soured over Japan's repeated whitewashing of its colonial-era atrocities and claims to Korea-controlled Dokdo Island. President Park then cast light on the unsettled issue surrounding Korean women forced into sex slavery by the Japanese military during World War II.
특히 군대 위안부 문제 같은 것은 두 나라 사이의 문제뿐만 아니라 또 보편적인 여성 인권에 관한 문제이기도 하기 때문에 좀 어떤 진정성 있는 노력으로 잘 풀려 나가기를 기대하고 있습니다.
The Korean president also asked the Tokyo governor to ensure the safety of Koreans and their businesses in Japan in the wake of anti-Korea protests carried out by some interest groups. Friday's talks between President Park and Masuzoe are considered to have reflected both Seoul and Tokyo's willingness to engage. But so long as the Abe administration continues to deny Japan's past wrongdoings, an improvement in ties seems far off. Choi Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, a UN panel is urging Japan to provide a public apology and compensation to the victims of its wartime system of sex slavery.
The call comes as two elderly victims continue their mission in the United States to raise awareness about the horrors they faced. Our Park Ji-won has this report.
Two victims of Japan's wartime system of sexual slavery visited the city of Glendale in California this week. It's where a monument dedicated to them and the thousands of other victims, a bronze statue of a young girl dressed in traditional Korean clothing, is set up.
Please help us, the victims, receive an apology before we all die.
Lee Ok-soon says She was abducted by Japanese soldiers when she was only 15 and sent to a military brothel. To this day, the Japanese government denies its military operated the brothels, despite a huge amount of evidence that shows the military did. The two women, now in their late 80s, spoke out against some Japanese Americans and Japanese officials who want the statue removed.
They're saying really inhumane things.
Both women will stay in the U.S. for another couple of weeks. They will travel to Virginia and New Jersey and to other monuments set up in memory of all those who suffered under Japan's cruel system of sexual slavery. Meanwhile, a UN panel is urging Japan to provide a public apology and compensation to the victims of its wartime sex slave victims before it's too late. The UN Human Rights Committee said Thursday, after reviewing the records of several countries, it's concerned about the re-victimization of the former sex slavery victims. The panel criticized the Japanese government for continuously denying its responsibility and even defaming the victims, rather than taking the necessary steps to help them. The committee, made up of 18 independent experts, also noted that every compensation claim brought by victims has been dismissed, and every call to ask for independent investigation on the sex slavery has been rejected in Japan. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, South Korea has urged North Korea to refrain from unilaterally changing regulations for South Korean workers at the Kaesong industrial complex.
Seoul's Unification Ministry said Friday that it sent a message to Pyongyang expressing regret over stricter rules that were recently put in place. South Koreans found carrying items like mobile phones into the business park now faces a one-day entry ban.
Well, previously, the workers could be fined around $100, and the ministry said any changes to rules at the complex should be discussed bilaterally and call for talks on the matter in the near future. Well, it looks like the death of fugitive Sewol ferry owner Yoo Byung-eun will remain a mystery. Korea's National Forensic Service says there is no doubt that the body found in a plum orchard in the south of the country in June is that of the country's most wanted fugitive, but they are unable to determine the cause of death. Well, in a nationally televised briefing Friday, the director of the agency said that the decomposition of the body was just too advanced to gain conclusive evidence on how he died, but added that forensic scientists had ruled out poisoning and suffocation, refuting conspiracy theories suggesting that the death of Yoo was faked. The director said in addition to DNA samples, a fingerprint sample, dental records, and estimate height also matched that of the 73-year-old Yoo. Now, Yoo, who disappeared shortly after the Sewol ferry disaster, was found dead last month in an orchard in southwestern Korea. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Chung, who promised the nation earlier this month to root out corruption after April's ferry disaster, has launched a special task force with that very goal in mind. 35 officials from government ministries and agencies, including the Justice Ministry, the Prosecutor's Office, and the State Tax Agency, have been commissioned to determine the state of corruption in both the public and private sectors, find the causes, and come up with countermeasures. Civic groups and the public will also be encouraged to take part in that campaign. Well, the Prime Minister said anyone convicted of corruption should not only face severe punishment, but be forced to cough up a greater amount than the gains made from their illegal activities. Korean voters don't have to wait until Election Day to cast ballots in the nation's largest ever by-elections, which is coming up on July 30th. A two-day early voting period started today, opening a race that has greater significance coming off local elections in June where no party could claim victory. Here's our Connie Kim.
2 days of early voting for the July 30th by-elections has begun. Those that cast ballots today and tomorrow will help determine the winners in Korea's largest ever by-elections, where 15 parliamentary seats are up for grabs. 6 of the vacant seats are in Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province, and analysts say winning the upper hand in those races may very well determine who won the election overall. 3 opposition candidates bowed out of their respective races on Thursday to circle the wagons around the Liberal candidate. In Seoul's Dongjakbi constituency, considered a barometer of public sentiment in the capital, the ruling party candidate is in the lead. According to the last opinion poll results released Wednesday, the ruling Saenuri Party candidate Na Kyung-won is in the lead by some 10 percentage points against her Justice Party rival No Hae-chan. Another district closely being watched is the Suwon-si district in Gyeonggi-do province, where the ruling party's Kim Yong-nam is in a heated race with former opposition leader Son Ha-kyu. Son had a slight lead of around 3 percentage points as of Wednesday. With just a few days to go before the by-elections, the ruling party lashed out at the opposition parties for unifying candidacies. The main opposition party also stepped up criticism of the ruling party, blaming it for delaying the passage of the special bill on April's ferry tragedy. The government's failed manhunt for the fugitive owner of the Seoul ferry, Yu Byung-an, has also been a focal point of the opposition's campaign. Despite the contentious issues, analysts don't expect a clear winner to emerge in these by-elections, much like in local elections in June. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
French troops are now headed to a remote area in Mali to secure the site of Thursday's Air Algerie jet crash, the third major international aviation disaster in just a week. The jetliner, owned by Spanish company Swiftair and leased by Algeria's flagship carrier, had 110 passengers and 6 crew members on board when it took off from Burkina Faso en route to Algiers. Arkhani Lee has the details.
A plane that went missing early Thursday has been found. The wreckage of Air Algerie flight 5017 has been spotted in Mali, according to officials.
The team has confirmed it has seen the remains of the plane, totally burned out and scattered on the ground. Sadly, the team saw no one on site. It saw no survivors.
It is possible that some parts of the aircraft were seen by locals in dune areas, near the village of Bosi in Mali. All this information will be confirmed after inquiries.
It was supposed to be a 4-hour overnight flight from Ouagadougou to Algiers, Algeria. But the flight, carrying 116 people on board, including French and Spanish nationals, lost radar contact just 50 minutes after takeoff, and now found crashed in Mali. Bad weather is being suspected as a cause. The flight had asked to change its route before losing contact because of a storm. The Air Algerie crash is the third plane disaster in a week. Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was brought down by a surface-to-air missile in Ukraine 1 week ago. And Taiwan's TransAsia Flight 222 crashed amid inclement weather on Wednesday. The death toll from all 3 crashes exceeds 400. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
The Korean government is putting forth its best efforts to shore up economic sentiment, but it won't be easy. The index that measures the overall economic outlook of consumers remains fastened at the same level recorded in the weeks immediately following the Seoul ferry disaster that slacked off private spending. Our Hwang Ji-hye reports.
This department store located in the heart of the capital Seoul seems to be bustling with people as usual, but a sales clerk says that's only because it's the weekend.
I feel like the number of customers dropped recently, and most of our customers during weekdays are tourists, not locals.
Reflecting that, the Bank of Korea said Friday the nation's consumer sentiment index stood at 105 in July, down 2 points from a month earlier. The figure had rebounded in June, suggesting that Korean consumers might be returning to their spending habits, which changed after April's ferry tragedy. The index hovered at around the 108 level in the first 4 months of this year, but dropped to 105 in May following the disaster. The figure returned to that level this month, and experts say that reflects the nation's still sluggish domestic demand.
Although the index did improve in June, the numbers show that the economy's overall domestic demand is not recovering to the pre-April disaster level.
Experts add that this month's consumer sentiment was also affected by the central bank's recent cut of its growth forecast for this year. The monthly index is a gauge of the overall economic outlook of consumers, their living conditions, and future spending plans. A reading over 100 means optimists outnumber pessimists. A recent poll by Nielsen also showed that Korea's consumer sentiment is near the bottom among 60 countries worldwide.
And the figures indicate a bumpy road ahead for President Park Geun-hye's new economic team and their attempts to pull the economy out of a low-growth rut by boosting domestic demand. 황지혜, Arirang News.
With domestic demand slumping and economic growth stagnant, speculation is growing that the central bank may cut its interest rate for the first time in more than a year next month. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
There's growing speculation the Bank of Korea will cut its interest rate in the latter half of this year, perhaps as early as next month. The government is reportedly pressuring the central bank to lower the rate, which has been kept at 2.5% for 14 straight months, in order to boost its expansionary fiscal and monetary policies. The nation's new economic team, led by Finance Minister Geunhye, announced on Thursday a $40 billion stimulus plan to spur growth by inducing spending and promoting corporate activity. The government request for a rate cut comes partly because it's too late to increase the supplementary budget, which could have been used to raise capital for the stimulus plan. The speculation of a rate cut is also being fueled by recent economic figures. The central bank announced Thursday that the economic growth rate in the second quarter inched up by a mere 0.6% from the previous quarter, lower than previous estimates. Those that support a rate cut say the move will induce domestic consumption, which was attributed as the main reason for the lack of growth from April to June. The plan is to reduce the amount of debt repayments, thus increasing the spending power of households. But some experts say cutting the interest rate is a double-edged sword that would actually increase household debt in the longer term and ultimately constrain domestic demand, since the policy would open the door for households to spend more despite their growing debt.
The stimulus plan can only be successful when it's combined with a monetary policy, such as an interest rate cut. However, cutting the interest rate could also worsen household debt.
The Bank of Korea's next rate-setting meeting is scheduled for August 14th. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Well, the future is now. The government has laid out a new plan to foster the nation's robotics industry over the next 5 years.
And the goal is quite simple and straightforward: to become a global leader in that field. Our Ji Myung-gil has the story.
The government is determined to forge a new path in the robotics industry and on Friday set up a roadmap for the next 5 years. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy hopes to expand the use of robot technology across a number of sectors such as manufacturing, automobiles and education. Developing various types of robots has been a national project since 2009, and this year signals the start of the plan's second stage. It recommends the government to invest $2.5 billion by the end of 2018 in joint projects with robotics companies. By 2018, the government hopes to see the domestic robotics market grow to more than $6 billion. Up from $2.1 billion in 2012. To achieve that goal, more attention will be paid to so-called humanoid robots that can be used in disaster missions and intelligent robots which can help with people with specific tasks. The government also plans to hold robotics competitions every year and strengthen cooperation with countries that are leaders in robotics technology. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Here's a question for our viewers around the world. What is the first word that comes to your mind when you think of Korea?
Well, according to a recent survey conducted on 6,000 people from 17 different countries upon the request of the Foreign Ministry, the most common response was technology.
You know, that came as a bit of a surprise to me because I thought, the Korean wave or K-pop would top the list.
Well, it was Samsung that came in second, followed by war and size hit song Gangnam Style.
Perhaps most shocking is that more than 30% of those surveyed said they found it hard to differentiate between South and North Korea. And 52% of respondents in Egypt fell in that category.
Well, on a more positive note, more than half of those who answered the survey said they would like to see Korea act as a bridge between advanced and developing economies throughout the world.
But I think still we need to, better promote South Korea so that we can be differentiated from North Korea. And one day perhaps we can just be referred to as one Korea. But now here's a look at the week's domestic headlines.
For that, we have our Yurian.
Good evening and happy Friday. Let's first take a look at Joseonilbo, which did a series covering some of the challenges Korea needs to tackle to boost the sluggish economy. First, taking a look at this article, which centers around how conglomerates have simply been turning their heads away from the problem. Now, taking a closer look at the graph over here, it shows the amount of capital investment in Korea by conglomerate has fallen over the past 2 years. Now, also companies like Samsung Electronics has been drastically expanding its employment overseas rather than in Korea in the past 3 years, as evident by the lighter colored figure. Now, Hyundai Motor also a similar story with a rise in the employment of foreigners. Now, while doing so, the article indicates that the country's top 10 conglomerates were able to cut down their debt ratio by 10 percentage points from 2009 to 2013. Now, continuing on with the series, the paper cites foreign experts who say the low dividend payments of Korean companies are a major weakness for the domestic economy. Now, dividend payments represent just 1% of the company's share price in Korea. That's the lowest among G20 countries, as can be seen here in the bar graph. Now, the chairman of Rogers Holdings says global investors undervalue Korean stocks because of the low dividend payments, and investment guru Mark Faber says at this rate, the Korean stock market could soon only draw in domestic investors. Now, moving on over to 중앙일보. And taking a look at the story here, it talks about how North Korea-China relations have sunk to a new low. Now, in the bullet points here, the paper talks about how China did not export oil to its traditional ally for 6 straight months. Now, that's shocking given that about 80% of North Korea's oil came from China. Also, high-level talks haven't been held for a year now, and China also lent support to a UN resolution against Pyongyang's recent missile launches. Now, the paper says the strained relations are the result of Chinese President Xi Jinping's global diplomacy. Xi has been placing much importance on the responsibility China now holds in the international community. And the United States acknowledged this during high-level talks earlier this month, the paper says, when State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki pointed out that China has beefed up its sanctions against North Korea. Now, finally, moving on over to Made Business and taking a look at the story here. It talks about how Korea's popular bakery shop, Paris Baguette, is opening a store in Paris. Funny enough, 26 years ago, Paris Baguette was first established as a way to bring French bakery skills here to Korea. Now, after growing into one of Korea's largest food manufacturers, the new store here, seen here in the photo near the Louvre Museum in Paris, is now aiming to woo French customers. Sitting amid thousands of restaurants that have for decades catered to the refined palate of the French, Paris Baguette's 26 years old of success will truly be put to test. Now, with that, I'll wrap up this week's look at some of the eye-catching stories from the Korean papers.
Well, here in the nation's capital, the rain has cleared out and the sun is shining bright here at the moment.
Well, don't get too used to it. That's the advisor Michelle Park has. She is standing by at the Weather Center to provide us with more details. So, Michelle, when is the rain supposed to start back up?
Well, good evening, guys, and of course, happy Friday. And we're expecting more rain to come over here in the capital city, more over to the hours. Now, up to 60 millimeters are forecast to fall here in Seoul throughout the night and into tomorrow, while other regions could see anywhere between 5 to 40 millimeters. Now, we can expect this rain to end tomorrow morning in most areas. Now, after the rain, we can expect a mild sunny day with highs into the high 20s to the low 30s. So if you have any outdoor plans on Saturday, the rain shouldn't be an issue. Now going over to our tomorrow's readings, Seoul will start off the morning at 24 and before reaching up to 27 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will peak up to 33 and 29 degrees. Now moving over to other regions, Jeju Island peaks over to 33, Dokdo hits 28, while Mankungang tops out to 29. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park and have a wonderful evening.
Well, that does it for us for this week. Thank you for watching. For our viewers in Korea, have a wonderful rest of the evening. This has been Daniel Choi.
And I'm Moon Gun-young. To those of you in other parts of the world, have a great start to your day. And for those of you here in Korea, have a wonderful weekend, the last weekend of July. And we hope to see you right back here, same time, Monday evening. Bye-bye.